my entire life, I've been a heavy smoker, starting since the age of 16, and now I'm paying the price for my foolish actions back in the day. 10 years ago, I was diagnosed with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, a nasty condition that has severely limited my life. I can barely climb stairs without running out of breath, and I can't do most of the things I used to. But the worst part of the disease is the acute exacerbations that occur from time to time. They're a living nightmare. They usually happen after a certain condition, like an infection. Suddenly, I feel like I'm suffocating, unable to breathe, and frequently lose consciousness. If it wasn't for my family rushing me to the hospital, I might have been dead a long time ago. But I'm not here to rant about my condition. I have a much more intense story to share. My most recent hospitalization was around 3 years ago, and although I didn't know much about what was happening the first day, I was getting better much faster. I shared a room with another person, a massive young man in his 30s. I didn't know much about him, but one day, as doctors discussed his case, I found out he was found in a nearby forest on the outskirts of town. He was clearly stabbed, and he probably crawled all the way out to the road to be found. Me and him had minimal interactions. Our conversations were limited to good morning and good night. I don't know why, but the man felt mysterious to me. No members of his family ever came to visit him, which was a bit odd for someone his age. Didn't he have anyone that cared about him? However, I was no one to really care that much about it. But as night came, that guy got agitated. I was left there to witness all that on my own with him. He would suddenly start screaming and yelling different names. Jack, Jamie, where are you? Get out now. He kept repeating these sentences over and over again, making no sense to me at that point. But one night, as he slept, I decided to watch some news. Nothing really caught my attention, except 2 names. According to the news, 2 teenagers by the name Jack and Jamie Hopkins were reported missing for the past 6 days by their families. Those names were very common to me at this point, and it immediately caught my attention. Looking closer at the case, I started Googling here and there, reading different articles about the situation, and found out that those teenagers were camping in the same forest my roommate was found stabbed in. It was surely no coincidence to me. Looking closer at the pictures of the teenagers, I noticed that one of the teenagers, Jamie, was wearing a necklace that I was certain I've seen on my roommate's table. Curiosity got the best of me, and I decided to take a closer look. As I made sure he slept, I got up very slowly and carefully. I made sure not to turn on the lights and only used the faint light of my phone's screen, not even wanting to use my phone's torch. I approached his table, started looking inside the drawers, but suddenly I felt something grab my hand. Immediately, I realized it was him. He grabbed me so hard I felt he was about to break my wrist. His hand felt so cold as he uttered with a deep monotone voice, "What are you looking for here?" Although I almost fainted from fear, I found the perfect lie. "I'm looking for some painkillers. My head is killing me. Do you have any?" "No, I don't," he immediately replied without a second thought as he let go of my hand. I went back to my place, and for the entire rest of the night, he was just there, watching me. I was very certain that he wasn't even asleep. He was just there, watching me. I couldn't sleep either, but I tried to act as if I was sleeping, not wanting any unwanted attention from him. During that entire night, he surely had a plan in his head. He would get up, walk towards me, and then go back to his place, without any goal whatsoever. However, I knew very well that he surely didn't have any good intentions, and I confirmed that. As dawn fell, I could see him approaching me. This time, he held his pillow in his hands, and I immediately knew what he was thinking about. So I immediately woke up, started stretching, acting as if I just woke up from sleep, and he immediately went back to his bed. That night felt like an eternity, and him just lying there and looking at me surely didn't help. What made it worse is that he suddenly uttered, "I know you are not asleep, so can we talk now?" After a moment of silence, I replied, "Talk about what?" "Talk about how you want to die." His words echoed in my mind, making me vibrate. I immediately jumped out of my bed, not even feeling sick anymore. Before even realizing it, he was already in front of me, pushing me to the wall and choking me. I almost felt his finger pierce through my neck. So that's how it's all going to end. That's the only thought that was running in my head. Suddenly, I woke up. I realized I blacked out, and all I saw was 2 security agents pinning the man down. I later on was told a doctor who was walking by reported the situation, and I was thankfully saved. After further investigations, the man was identified as Larry Turt, the prime suspect in the case of the disappearance of the teenage siblings. It was later found that Larry had murdered and buried both of the teenagers in the same forest, and during the act, he was stabbed by one of them. And I was locked in the entire time with a psychopathic killer. Last summer, my beautiful little kid, Jack, found himself admitted to the hospital for the first time. As we were at home, he suddenly started crying and complaining about pain in his lower right abdomen. He was febrile, kept vomiting, and I immediately thought something was off. I called my friend, who worked as a nurse in a nearby public hospital, and she ordered me to bring him there immediately, suspecting he had appendicitis. Turns out she was correct, as later confirmed by the doctors there. Unfortunately, he had to undergo surgery to remove his appendix. Though it totally broke my heart, I had total trust in our doctors. The surgery didn't take too long, and I was reunited with my beautiful child shortly after. Doctors decided Jack had to stay in the hospital for another week, as they said they had to watch for him and prevent any possible complications. They said they had to make sure he was completely stable before letting him go home. I totally understood that, so I had to take a week off of work to stay with him in the hospital, a request that my boss happily accepted. Jack was asleep most of the day, still weak and tired from the surgery. But every time it got dark outside, Jack would start acting all weird. He would tell me that he's not feeling okay, and that he's a little bit scared. But I just stood with him and reassured him nothing bad would happen to him as long as I am with him. One night, as Jack was asleep, I went outside the room. I was too tired of sitting down the entire day and just wanted to walk a little bit in the hallway. I kept going back and forth, stretching my muscles a little bit. One time, I thought that I heard the voice of some footsteps behind me. The footsteps were so fast, as if someone was running in the hallway. I immediately turned around, thinking it might be a nurse or someone else, but no one was there to be found. I thought I just imagined that. But just as I was heading back into Jack's room, I heard a grotesque scream coming out of his room. It was Jack's voice. He was screaming and crying, "Mom, Mom." I immediately felt my heart drop, even felt dizzy a little, but I rushed towards his room, went inside, and immediately grabbed his hand and started kissing him. "What's going on, baby? Don't worry. It's just a nightmare. Don't worry. Mommy is here. You'll be fine." During all these reassuring words, Jack's eyes were wide open, completely fixated on the chair next to his bed. The same chair I sat on almost the entire day for the past 2 days. He didn't say a word, just clearly terrified and said absolutely nothing. But as I reassured him, he went back to sleep like a little angel. Although that was a pretty weird encounter, I thought that it was probably a nightmare, especially that Jack was taking some anti-analgesic drugs at the time, and I thought they were just making him imagine stuff that didn't exist. I just sat on the chair for the next few hours, standing by his side, and without realizing it, I fell asleep. But in the middle of the night, something woke me up. A voice of knocking. Someone was knocking on the wall in the other room that was immediately next to ours. What was weird is that that room was vacant for the past few days. Not believing myself, I went there, and there was absolutely no one. And as soon as I stepped my foot inside, the voice immediately ceased. And that's when I really started feeling a little bit uneasy, and feeling that I was being watched. Although I never really believed in any of the ghost tales, not even as a kid. But what happened last was really the straw that broke the camel's back. As I went outside of the hospital one night, getting to buy stuff we needed, as I was heading back inside the hospital, I could clearly take a look at my son's room. He was asleep at that time, and I was pretty sure the light was off when I left. Weirdly enough, the light was on, and I could clearly see what's inside. I could see a shadowy figure of what seemed to be a woman with very long hair that cascaded down her shoulders. She was sitting on my chair, next to my kid. But whatever that thing was, it was immediately turned towards the window and started waving at me. That thing sensed I was there. She got off of the chair and walked towards the window and just kept waving at me. I immediately rushed through the stairs to my son, and there was no one there. Even the lights were once again turned off. I had to ask to be moved out of that room. Luckily enough, they accepted that, and our last 2 days in that hospital were smooth sailing. I don't know what that thing was, but I now know for certain that ghosts do exist.